So, Marathon has come out, and I've put almost 20 hours into the game at this point to really get a good grip and understanding of what exactly this has to offer. And to be honest with you, it is not at all what I expected, or the way that I thought that I would feel about this game is not at all what I was anticipating. Now, the Steam charts have come out for Marathon, and over the last couple of days, depending on who you ask, this paints a totally different narrative. Either some people are looking at these charts and assume that Marathon is, a complete flop, Concord 3.0. But other people are looking at these charts and seeing that despite it maybe not reaching the heights that Bungie or even Sony expected, it is retaining a fairly steady player count. Now, it was important for me to approach Marathon with a clear mind and without any bias as much as that's possible, either positive or negative, and just take the experience as is and just see how it makes me feel. And I also didn't want to give you guys an impression or review after like my first match or two, because a lot of people were posting reviews after playing it for like 5 minutes and had very, very polarizing takes. So I really wanted to take the time to actually learn the nitty-gritty of the game, and after about 20 hours I think I have a very good understanding of exactly the kind of player this might appeal to, and also who this won't be for, because I don't think that Marathon is necessarily going to be for everybody. But at the same time, there's a reason why those Steam chart player counts are so steady right now, because this game will have an audience, and that audience will be sticking around. All right, so there's a lot to unpack, but we'll just start with the basic premise. Marathon is an extraction shooter developed by Bungie, and the entire goal of an extraction shooter is that you load into an area and you just need to collect as much gear as possible, whether that be from the environment, the enemies within that world, or even other actual players that you might kill and encounter in the game. Whatever means you find appropriate, you just need to collect as much gear as you can, get good weapons, shields, all that kind of stuff, but you will only keep it if you successfully extract out of the map, and that can be a challenge in and of itself. All of the gear that you bring into your next match, assuming that you made it out alive in your previous one, will become at risk in your next game, and if you die, obviously you lose everything. Now, Marathon's extraction mechanics are, pretty standard as far as that's concerned. If you've played any other kind of extraction shooter in the past, either Tarkov or Arc Raiders, then you're already familiar with this concept and it's really not too foreign. But there is also a lot of out-of-game progression to be had. Now, as soon as you start playing Marathon, this was one of the biggest criticisms I saw right when the game released, is that the UI and the menus are just an absolute mess. And that is only true for a little bit. The way that they present all of the menus can be incredibly messy. However, once you kind of figure out how everything works, it takes about an hour or two just to really understand where everything goes. You will pretty easily get to a point where you can navigate this menu without any trouble, even though it seems incredibly overwhelming, and I do think that this is going to be a pretty big turnoff to people. It is one of those problems that goes away after a couple of hours. You just sort of have to grin and bear it for the most part, but there is kind of a lot of that learning curve to be had, not only in the menus, but in the actual game. I would say that you need to probably put up front 4 to 5 hours, minimum, to just really get past that initial learning barrier before you can start having any fun. Now, I will say in my playtime, I've been playing a lot of solo Marathon, but I've also played a fair bit of co-op as well. And what I will say in regards to these two types of play is co-op is significantly easier if you are playing with a team that you can talk to and communicate with. I'm not talking about playing with randoms. I'm talking about playing with people that are mic'd up, your friends, and maybe people that even somewhat know the game. It is going to be a much more pleasurable experience for your at least couple first hours of learning the game. However, you can definitely play solo viably, and you can still do all of your contracts. You can navigate all of the areas on your own, and that is definitely a viable play style. It's just significantly harder. Also, because people and the way they play is extremely aggressive, which, I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it means that solo, you basically have no second chances. Now, the reason I titled this video the way I did is because Marathon isn't what I expected. Before I started playing, I expected that I wasn't really going to care for a lot of the PvP elements of this, and I was looking forward to some of the interesting PvE stuff they had going on and things like like that, but it actually ended up being the complete inverse for me. I'm finding the PvE, at least right now, incredibly boring. Now, we'll talk about how that could be more interesting in a little bit, but it's actually the PvP that I'm finding myself enjoying the most. And I typically don't really care for like heavy PvP extraction shooters. It's just not really exactly my thing, but I'm actually enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. But the PvE elements are severely underwhelming. And I saw a lot of people comparing Marathon PvE to Arc Raiders, which I can't really speak on too much because I don't play Arc Raiders like at all. But from what I hear, and probably a lot of you guys could tell me as well, the Arc Raiders enemies seem to be a lot more, thought out, and there's a lot more depth to the PvE encounters in that game, and the PvP really carries Marathon as far as like replayability and depth and making runs interesting, because the UESC robots, while they do provide a decent challenge, they're basically just giant bullet sponges, and that's all there is to it. The difficulty just comes in the fact that they have a lot of health, and that's really all it boils down to. That's all to say that I've been a little bit disappointed by the incredibly static PvE encounters, but I've been delightfully surprised by the surprisingly interesting PvP, which again was just a complete inversion of what I was anticipating. But it does make me, reinforce the fact that people that enjoy PvP are definitely going to like Marathon, but in a game, this interesting with all of these characters in this universe that could have such amazing PvE encounters, currently, at the time of me recording this video, that really isn't the case. Now, for those of you who are playing Marathon, you may know that there are 3 different locations right now. There is the Perimeter, which is just the easiest area. There is Dire Marsh, which is kind of like a middle ground difficulty. And then there's Outpost, which is an amazing map and the highest difficulty so far. And Bungie and, Marathon has said that they recommend holding off on reviews until you play Cryo Archive, which is basically the end game. And look, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that there's some probably really cool stuff in Cryo Archive. I believe that that is where the most interesting PvE stuff is going to be found. That's essentially going to be a Destiny raid, type of puzzle elements and bosses and everything. I think Cryo Archive is going to be as good as they're saying it is. However, the problem is it's not in the game yet, and it isn't going to be at least for a little while. And that's because the player base simply isn't ready for it, which I get it, but at the same time, if you had put it in the game, like, gamers are going to get ready for it if it's there. And as far as I know, they're planning on releasing Cryo Archives in like late March, but I can't guarantee that I'll still be around playing Marathon by the time it comes around, if there's nothing else going on here. And the reason I bring up Cryo Archive is because my biggest critique of Marathon at the moment is almost nothing to do with its gameplay. In fact, I think it's an incredibly polished game. It's come a long way since its initial playtest, and it is genuinely really fun. However, I can't help but feel that despite Marathon being an objectively well-made game, and a good game for that matter, it is lacking that X factor for me, that intangible element that makes a game unbelievably addicting. It's hard to put into words, but I'm sure a lot of your favorite games, you can think about that X factor that really just does it for you. And I think for me, all of the pieces are there that make up a good game, right? It has progression, all of the faction progressions, going in and doing your contracts, doing your checklisty things, like, that's fun to a degree, I suppose, but that's not an X factor for me. Or even the PvP is incredibly fun and, again, delightfully surprising. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I ever thought I would, but it's still not quite that X factor for me that I really can't get in any other game. Marathon just still needs to take that extra step that will push it above and beyond and will make me just unable to put it down. Because as of right now, like, I will probably just pop back in whenever Cryo Archive comes out, but the fundamental core loop of just going in for gear, extracting, and just rinse and repeating that over and over again, just, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't particularly care for this brand of extraction, and I think it's extraction itself that might be the thing holding Marathon back. I know it's kind of a thing that people have talked a lot about, but it is a shame that Marathon is only in extraction mode. I really wish that this was just one part of a larger whole, and that Marathon had had maybe a different mode to play or something like that. In my perfect world, Marathon would be sort of a co-op survival roguelite, or it would at least have a mode like that alongside Extraction. If you're familiar with Elden Ring Night Rain, if you've played that game or even just know how it works, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think Marathon and the way that all of its loot mechanics work and its gunplay and the shells and the different abilities they come with could actually make for some really interesting like cooperative gameplay and great PvE encounters. And if this was basically a Night Rain kind of mode, I feel like that would actually be the X factor for me. I think it's just fundamentally the Extraction itself that I guess, I know works for a lot of people, but just for me personally, just isn't really that thing that's going to drive me back. And that's the weird part, right? Like everything on paper works for me. It is objectively a good game, all things considered. The art is divisive, but it's actually one of those things that I love. It's going to be very polarizing for people, but I applaud them for taking that risk, and it's something that I adore. I love this kind of aesthetic, and I love all of the art in the game. The gunplay is patently Bungie, and it makes the PvP encounters just excellent. They've been a treat, and I've just really been surprised about how much I'm enjoying the PvP aspect of this. But I think that fundamentally it's the fact that it's an extraction shooter is the real reason why I feel it's held back from its true potential. If this had been one part in a larger whole of a game, I think I would probably be a lot more gracious to it, but this is the only thing that it has to offer, and if the entire gameplay loop of going in, grabbing gear, and extracting just isn't really doing it for you, then it's gonna be hard to justify playing it long term and for lots of hours to get ready for endgame, even though I will admit that I'm sure that Cryo Archive is going to blow me away. I bet you it's going to be amazing, but I also think that a lot of people won't even be able to find that out for themselves because of just the amount that you have to put in to get there, and if you're not just really addicted to the extraction formula, then it might feel like a chore, getting to that point. I'm already getting to the point where we're grinding the factions and doing all the checklist stuff is kind of getting a little stale, and so if you're not worried about just actively grinding factions, the only thing really left to do is just constantly jump in PvP. That's it. And then you just wait for endgame. So it's kind of a weird game right now, and it's certainly strange not having the actual endgame stuff available for players that have already gotten to that point where they can theoretically access it. So I can't guarantee that everybody will be around by the time they do release this stuff, but I am definitely going to check back in and see how I feel about Cryo, because maybe that will change a lot of how I feel about this, and maybe it will be that X factor. But for now, I'm still yet to be proven on that. Either way, Marathon isn't what I expected, and I also don't think it's going to be for everybody. You've really got to like the extraction formula to like this, and I think for people that are looking for interesting PvE encounters, then maybe this one at the moment isn't going to be right for you. Either way, apologies for this being a couple days late. But I didn't want to put out a review after just playing it for an hour. I actually wanted to give this some real time and let it sink in, and also just let my thoughts kind of collect on how exactly I feel about it. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.